None of us ever knows how we will react in a crisis, especially when it means risking our own lives to try and save the life of a stranger. We begin in Greentown, Ohio, on the afternoon of December 23rd, 1994. When 10-year-old Janet Davidson's parents went Christmas shopping, they left their oldest son in charge of Janet and her cousin, Elias Salome.
Hey, hold on, wait a sec. Where are you guys going?
Elias and Janet wanted to go out for a walk, so they asked Scott permission, and he knew they were going to the woods.
Hey, this is the best because it's the slide.
They're pals. I mean, they're really close. They like to play games together.
They told me about the woods, and they said it was real small, Mom. Every trail that goes in goes right back out. But I did not know there was a pond in the woods.
Apparently what happened was the pond was mostly frozen over, so they decided to play on the ice.
They played around on the ice for a good while, and then decided to walk across the pond and go home that way.
When we continue.
And he wanted me to hand him a stick and try and pull him out. I didn't want to hand him one because he would have just yanked me right in there.
When 10-year-old Elias Salome and his cousin Janet fell into a frozen pond in the woods near their home, no one knew they were there. Matt Hoffman and his sister Katie happened to be cutting through the woods on their bikes.
We heard some screams, and we heard somebody yelling, "Help, help, anybody." Come on, let's go. Ah! Over there, come on. He was pretty panicky. And he wanted me to hand him a stick and try and pull him out. I knew there wasn't one long enough to get out there, and I didn't want to go in the water and hand him one because he would have just yanked me right in with him, and then I would have been screaming with him. I need to go get help! I told my sister to stay there and make sure nothing else happens. I knew that I had to run faster than I'll ever run.
He's going to get help! I was all alone and I didn't know what to do. And I was scared because she wasn't breathing. And I thought that she was already dead.
At the nearest house, Karen Daly Rowlands and her son were just leaving.
Mrs. Camptelli! Mrs. Camptelli! 2 kids...
The little boy kept screaming to us that 2 kids had fallen through the ice on the pond, and he believed that one was dead. There was a little girl floating face down in the water, and the little boy was screaming. I just knew that we had to get him out of there before he was underwater, too.
Honey, you're okay.
There was nothing around to throw out to these kids, so I had my son stripped down to his underwear, and he didn't hesitate. He just went in. I was really proud of him.
18-year-old Chris was tall enough to walk out into the pond.
The ice wasn't very thick. It was fairly easy to break. But the mud was up to my ankles or past. It made it really difficult to walk. When I got to the boy, I was up to my neck in the water. He said, "Don't worry about me. I'm okay. Get my cousin."
Chris looked at me and I said, "Get the little boy," because he was closer and I knew he was alive.
You got it. You got it. Come on. I got you. I got you. I got you.
I got to the point where it started getting too deep. It was like, man, I can't make it.
I can't make it.
My niece threw me a big branch, and I told Chris, hold on to the stick and go get the little girl, and if you start going under, don't let go of the stick.
Come on. You're almost there. You're almost there.
I got her. I got her.
All right.
I was waiting for her to show a sign of life, but she never did.
Janet had been under the icy water for nearly 15 minutes.
Her face was like a white-blue color, and her eyes were rolled back into her head. It was an awful sight. She was not breathing. She did not have a pulse. I'm a nurse, and I just knew that people usually don't make it when they're to that point.
I was scared. I was very scared. I loved my cousin. I just couldn't picture it without her there.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4.
And every time I did a compression, muddy water would fly out of her mouth.
Come on, Janet.
I felt my heart beating real fast. I had to get this little girl back to life.
1 and 2 and 3.
The first rescue worker on the scene was Greentown volunteer fire paramedic Ken Brown.
The lady, she was doing great CPR, so I told her just to keep on going. One good thing that happened was that hypothermia was setting in because she was so cold, and that usually buys us time.
Keep going, Janet. Come on, Janet. Keep breathing. Come on, honey.
I noticed that the patient was starting to gasp for air, but she was basically a lifeless doll.
When 10-year-old Janet Davidson arrived at Children's Hospital Medical Center of Akron, her body temperature was only 88 degrees. Emergency physician Nargis Deliri took over her care.
The greatest fear is significant brain damage, and she was manifesting some of those symptoms by being combative.
Get me some more warm blankets and...
We gave her warm IV fluids. We also have a radiant heater, and that helped to bring her temperature up.
Sweetie, can you tell us what your name is?
Yeah.
Janet? Janet? You know where you are, sweetie?
Uh-huh. When I woke up in the emergency room, I'm like, wow, because I thought I was going to die, and I thought it was really, great that I was still alive.
Glad you're doing better now, and you did a wonderful...
I was trying to hold her up and hold on to the ice, but every time I did that, the ice would crack or I'd sink. They opened the shades, and we saw each other. She looked dirty, but I knew she was alive. That's all I needed to know.
Renee Davidson and her husband Denny came to the hospital as soon as they learned what had happened to their daughter.
She said, "I'm sorry, Mom." I cried, gave her a hug, and told her that the most important thing was for her to get well. Don't worry about anything else. Just feel better.
Obviously, Janet's doing real well right now.
Pediatric intensivist Mike Billow took over Janet's care.
She didn't demonstrate any signs of development of any lung infection, any neurologic problems or heart problems. She should live a healthy, normal life.
One of the things that sticks with me is if this had happened in my very own backyard, I could not have saved Janet. I don't know CPR, and Karen did.
I would encourage everyone to take a basic life support course, because if you don't do anything, the outcome is going to be death in most cases.
Here she is, isn't she just beautiful?
Recently, Janet and her family got a chance to meet her rescuers.
Janet walked in the house. She was so beautiful. It's an experience I'll never forget. I feel like I was blessed by having this experience for saving these kids' lives. I feel it's the next best thing next to the birth of my nieces and nephews and son.
Hello.
You can't thank somebody enough for saving your life. I mean, because if, they hadn't been there, then I would be dead. I really would.
Elias's mom, Regina Salome, is also grateful.
They gave us our children. There's nothing anyone could do for us more than that. It's just wonderful that strangers and not think of themselves or what risk it could have been to them to save 2 children. Thank you for our children. God bless you.
Next,